When an avoidant man hurts a good woman, he often believes the impact stays contained to that exact moment. In the argument, in the cold silence, in the distant replies, or when he creates space and calls it distance, he assumes it ends there. But what he does not realize is that a good woman does not always break loudly. She does not always cry in front of him, argue endlessly, or make a dramatic exit. Sometimes she breaks quietly, in silence, and that silence begins to reshape everything. While he assumes time will reset things, something inside her begins to settle into a final conclusion. She grows tired in a deeper emotional way. She stops explaining what should already be understood. She stops chasing someone who keeps withdrawing. She stops trying to pull love out of someone who only shows it when he feels her slipping away. And that is where the shift begins. What follows is not revenge or manipulation, and it is not a silent strategy meant to send a message. It is something far more personal and internal. It is transformation, a quiet shift that begins when a woman realizes that love should never feel like she is constantly asking for basic emotional care. Good women are capable of holding a lot. They can tolerate confusion, mixed signals, and emotional inconsistency longer than most people expect. They can love someone while also carrying the weight of understanding their pain and still choosing patience. They can see fear behind emotional distance and respond with kindness. But even the strongest patience has limits. Is the moment her tolerance ends, not because love disappears, but because clarity arrives. From the outside, nothing may look dramatically different at first. She may still respond, still smile, still sit across the table and carry herself in a way that seems familiar. But internally, everything has changed. She is no longer fully invested in trying to fix what keeps breaking. Instead of pouring herself into explanations or emotional effort, she becomes more observant. She watches patterns rather than reacting to them. She notices what is consistent and what is not, what feels safe and what feels uncertain. Her energy is no longer freely given. It is now carefully managed. She is not acting cold or distant in a dramatic way. She is protecting what remains of her emotional balance. This is the quiet stage most people miss, because on the surface, the relationship still appears intact, but inside her, attachment is slowly being replaced with awareness and self-protection. From the outside, the relationship may still seem alive and unchanged, but internally, something has already ended. It is not loud or obvious, which is why it is often missed. There is no dramatic breakup in that moment, no final argument that marks closure. Instead, there is a quiet emotional withdrawal happening within her. She becomes calmer, not because she is happier, but because she is done investing emotionally in uncertainty. When a woman reaches this stage, she no longer reacts with the same intensity or urgency. She understands more than she speaks and feels less need to express what will not be received properly. This is where the real ending begins, not in physical separation, but in emotional detachment. And once that detachment sets in, it rarely reverses, because it is not driven by anger, but by repeated emotional exhaustion turning into clarity. He begins to lose something he never fully realized he depended on so deeply: her emotional safety, calming presence, and the natural ease she brought into his life. A good woman often becomes an emotional anchor in a relationship, creating stability even when everything else feels uncertain. He may have believed that being with her felt comfortable or effortless without understanding the deeper reason behind it. In truth, he was benefiting from being with someone who regulated the emotional atmosphere of the connection, someone who offered warmth without pressure, care without conditions, and understanding without constant demand. But as repeated hurt accumulates, that environment begins to shift. Not in a dramatic way, but in subtle changes that are easy to miss until they build up. The emotional safety he once leaned on starts to fade, and he begins to feel an unfamiliar discomfort in the same space that once felt like home. Over time, the emotional warmth in the relationship does not disappear all at once, but it steadily weakens in a way that is easy to underestimate. The affection becomes less effortless. Her smile is still present, but it carries less emotional light than before. Messages still come back, but they are shorter, simpler, and less expressive. Conversations still happen, but they no longer reach the deeper emotional places they once naturally did. She avoids opening doors to vulnerability because those spaces have repeatedly led to disappointment or hurt. What once felt like natural emotional flow now feels carefully controlled. Warmth cannot survive in an environment where trust is repeatedly broken because it depends on emotional safety to stay alive. And once that safety is gone, even if everything looks the same on the surface, the emotional connection has already changed direction permanently. When a woman starts to feel unseen, dismissed, or repeatedly pushed to the side, her natural warmth begins to fade without any dramatic announcement. What replaces it is basic respect, politeness, and surface-level kindness. But the deeper emotional glow that once made the connection feel alive slowly disappears. The relationship starts to feel hollow, like two people still communicating, still meeting, still technically together, but no longer emotionally connected in any real sense. He begins to notice it in small details he once ignored. Shorter hugs, a pause before she says goodnight, or the way her expression no longer brightens when he walks into the room. What once felt effortless and constant is now missing. And by the time he realizes he misses that warmth, it is no longer something she can simply turn back on, because it was never something forced. It only existed where trust felt safe and protected. For most of the relationship, she is the one investing more emotionally, waiting longer, adjusting herself, and giving him the benefit of the doubt even when clarity is missing. Over time, he becomes used to that effort, and without realizing it, a quiet imbalance forms where he holds more emotional control. He can withdraw, stay distant, or delay connection, while still assuming she will remain emotionally available. But eventually, something inside her shifts. The weight of staying starts to feel heavier than the fear of leaving. What once felt like patience begins to feel like self-abandonment. That is when everything changes. She stops chasing understanding, stops over-explaining her feelings, and stops trying to repair emotional distance on her own. Now the dynamic reverses, and he becomes the one watching closely, sensing the gap, and questioning her quiet withdrawal. The power he never questioned begins to slip away without warning. When her softness disappears and pursuit turns into silence, he starts experiencing a kind of anxiety he did not expect. The same distance he once used for comfort now feels uncertain and emotionally heavy. He begins overanalyzing small details, like slower replies or shorter messages, trying to decode what changed. That silence no longer feels peaceful or freeing. It feels final in a way he cannot ignore. At the same time, her emotional openness continues to close. She is still kind and respectful, but no longer unguarded or fully emotionally available. And that absence is what affects him most, because softness cannot be demanded or forced back once trust has been broken. It only returns where it feels safe again. This is where he starts replaying everything, realizing that the relationship did not collapse suddenly, but faded through repeated moments he did not fully value at the time. He may never say any of this out loud. On the surface, he might still look unchanged, acting normal, continuing with his life as if nothing has shifted. But internally, something unsettled begins to grow. A quiet doubt that doesn't explode, but lingers. And that's what makes it so uncomfortable. Because awareness alone doesn't create change. Realizing a pattern is harming you is not the same thing as knowing how to stop repeating it. So he finds himself in a difficult in-between space. He can see more clearly now, but he still doesn't know how to become different. That gap between insight and transformation can feel surprisingly heavy, and it often becomes the place where people stay stuck for a long time. If this is starting to feel familiar, it's because this is usually where the story deepens. He tries to move forward, or at least convince himself he already has. He keeps himself occupied. New conversations, new people, work, distractions, anything that creates movement. But slowly, something starts to stand out. None of it feels quite the same. The conversations are fine, but they lack depth. The attraction might be there, but the ease is missing. One person feels too intense, another too distant, another simply doesn't feel emotionally safe enough to relax around. And without meaning to, he starts comparing everything to what he had before. Not in an idealized way, but in a recognition that something important is missing. A kind of emotional balance he didn't fully appreciate at the time now feels rare in its absence. As this realization grows, regret becomes more specific and harder to ignore. It's no longer about vague loss, it becomes comparison. He sees that what he lost wasn't just someone good, but a particular kind of emotional connection that doesn't show up often. A woman who could offer closeness without overwhelming him, who could understand his emotional complexity without punishing him for it, who gave patience without erasing herself in the process. And now, every new connection starts reflecting that absence back at him. Not because others are lacking, but because what he once had carried a certain emotional depth that is not easily replicated. The mistake begins to look less like losing a relationship and more like damaging something that had real potential to be stable, healing, and rare. Over time, the same patterns that once felt like protection start to feel different. Distance, emotional control, independence. What once gave him comfort now begins to feel more isolating than safe. The space he used to create for relief becomes a space filled with emptiness. And this is where the realization deepens. Those habits only felt manageable because there was someone on the other side softening their impact. Her presence, her patience, her emotional effort were quietly balancing what he could not yet balance within himself. Without her, the structure collapses back onto him. The silence is no longer peaceful. The distance is no longer comfortable. It starts to feel like disconnection rather than relief. And for the first time, he begins to sense the emotional cost of what he repeatedly called space. While this unfolds for him, what makes this aftermath so powerful is that it reshapes both people, even if they never talk about it again. He learns, often too late, that someone's presence is not guaranteed just because they once cared deeply. He learns that patience is not permanence, that understanding someone's wounds does not mean they are meant to carry them indefinitely, and that emotional distance is never consequence-free, even if the consequences don't arrive immediately. Meanwhile, she learns something just as important. She learns that depth of feeling is not meant to justify depletion, that kindness does not require constant self-sacrifice, that the moment she stops abandoning herself, her life doesn't become emptier, it becomes clearer, steadier, and more honest. So if you're the one who was hurt, this is where the meaning changes. That quiet shift you went through is not weakness, it's awareness finally taking shape. It's the moment you stopped negotiating with what kept hurting you. And if you're the one who caused the hurt, the hardest realization usually doesn't come during the conflict or even at the ending. It comes later, when the emotional version of her you took for granted no longer exists in the same way. Not because she stopped being kind, but because she stopped abandoning herself to remain available. That's when the truth lands fully. The version of her who stayed through confusion, who explained too much, who softened too often, is no longer operating from the same place. She didn't become cold, she became clear. And that clarity changes everything. The relationship you remember no longer exists in that form because one person in it is no longer the same. The The real story always continues after the visible ending. It unfolds quietly, in the way she learns to stop interpreting inconsistency as something she can fix by trying harder, in the way she stops shrinking to keep emotional peace, in the way she begins choosing herself without guilt, and in the way he slowly realizes that what felt optional in the moment was actually irreplaceable in the long run. Some realizations don't arrive loudly. They arrive slowly enough to ignore at first and permanently enough to reshape everything afterward. And by the time they fully land, she is no longer in the same emotional position where she was once available to be misunderstood. She has moved forward, not in anger, but in understanding, not in revenge, but in clarity. And that is the part that stays. What often gets missed in these dynamics is that the real shift doesn't happen at the moment of separation or emotional distance. It happens much earlier, in small internal decisions that are almost invisible from the outside. A woman doesn't usually wake up one day and suddenly detach. She arrives there through repetition, through being misunderstood once, then again, until her inner system quietly reorganizes itself around protection instead of hope. It's not dramatic, it's gradual. And that's exactly why it's so irreversible once it fully settles in. At first, she still tries. She still explains. She still gives extra patience where clarity is missing. She still believes effort will eventually be matched. But over time, something subtle shifts. She stops expecting emotional consistency from someone who has repeatedly shown inconsistency. That's the turning point most people don't notice. Not because love disappears, but because expectation changes shape. And once expectation changes, behavior follows. She starts investing less emotionally, not out of punishment, but out of self-preservation. Meanwhile, the other person often doesn't register the shift until the emotional contrast becomes obvious. When someone is used to receiving warmth, understanding, and emotional availability, they rarely notice its value in real time. It blends into the background of comfort. But when that presence starts to withdraw, even slightly, it becomes noticeable in very ordinary moments. Conversations feel less open. Emotional access feels narrower. The relationship still exists structurally, but the emotional ease is gone. And that absence creates confusion, because nothing external may have changed dramatically, yet everything feels different. What makes this stage especially complex is that both people are often operating from delayed perception. She has already emotionally adjusted before she physically withdraws. He only begins to emotionally register the loss after he starts feeling its effects. That timing gap creates a situation where one person is already in acceptance while the other is just beginning to realize something is wrong. And by the time that realization fully forms, the emotional landscape has already shifted too far to easily return to its previous state. Another layer underneath all of this is how differently safety and freedom are experienced. Many avoidant patterns are built around preserving autonomy, avoiding emotional pressure, and maintaining space. In the short term, that can feel stabilizing. But over time, when emotional responsibility is not shared, the other person in the relationship often carries the weight of maintaining connection. That imbalance doesn't always show up loudly. It shows up in who initiates repair, who explains, who waits, who adapts. And eventually, the one doing more emotional labor reaches a point where effort no longer feels meaningful. When that happens, her withdrawal is not a reaction to a single event. It's the result of accumulated emotional math finally resolving itself. She stops overextending because overextension stops producing connection. She stops interpreting distance as something she can fix through understanding. She stops framing inconsistency as something temporary. And at that point, her emotional system shifts from "how do I make this work?" to Is this working for me at all? That internal question changes everything. In the end, what this kind of experience reveals is not just about one person hurting another or one dynamic going wrong, but about how emotional bonds actually dissolve when safety is repeatedly compromised. Most relationships don't end in a single defining moment. They end in layers. Small disappointments that were never fully repaired, small distances that were never fully closed, small needs that were quietly postponed until they became emotional debt. And that debt doesn't stay invisible forever. At some point, the internal cost becomes louder than the external attachment, and something shifts that can't be undone by words alone. For her, that shift often looks like calm on the surface, but clarity underneath it. She doesn't necessarily stop caring overnight. What changes is that care is no longer unconditional in its expression. It becomes filtered through experience, through memory, through pattern recognition. She stops giving emotional access on the assumption that it will be handled well. Instead, she starts waiting for proof. Not promises, not intentions, but consistency over time. And when that proof doesn't arrive, she doesn't always argue, she simply adjusts. That adjustment is what people later mistake as sudden distance, when in reality it is the final stage of many earlier decisions. For him, the ending often arrives in a very different emotional language. At first, it is absence that feels temporary. Then it becomes confusion. Then it becomes recognition that something has changed. And finally, it becomes understanding that what left was not just the relationship, but the emotional version of her that once made the relationship feel safe and alive. That realization is what creates the deepest impact. Not just missing the person, but missing the emotional environment she created before she had to protect herself from repeating hurt. What makes this especially difficult to process is that regret and readiness rarely arrive together. Someone can fully understand what went wrong and still not have the internal stability required to act differently. That gap is where many people get stuck, between insight and transformation. And in that gap, opportunities for repair often expire. Not because love is gone, but because trust has already been reorganized around self-protection.